Hello, welcome to this Technocamps tutorial on Adobe Animate. In the tutorial, we will be using Adobe Animate to create an animation that shows an example of the difference between shapes, graphic symbols, and movie clip symbols. Here is an example of the animation that we will be aiming to create. So we'll show on the left side of the screen the shape and how we animate that. In the middle then we'll have the graphic symbol and how we can animate that. And then to the right we'll have the movie clip symbol and how we can animate that. So when we create the symbols for the graphic and the movie clip, we will create nested animations within the symbols also. We can play the animation to show the example. And the purpose of this tutorial is to understand the differences between shapes, graphic symbols and movie clip symbols, and to try to understand when you might use a shape or a graphic symbol or a movie clip symbol. Let's begin by creating a new file. So we'll go to File, New, and for the format of the file I'm going to choose the preset HD. We'll keep the frame rate as 24, so that's 24 frames per second of the animation being displayed, and we'll keep the platform type as ActionScript 3.0. I prefer to use ActionScript 3.0 because with this platform type, when you preview your animation in Animate, it opens up the animation in a window within Animate. But if you set your platform type as HTML5 canvas, and then you preview your animations with this platform type, it will open the preview in a web browser. So I just prefer the preview being opened within Animate by using ActionScript 3.0. In terms of the platform type affecting the outcome of the final animation, choosing between ActionScript 3.0 and HTML5 canvas does not affect the animation if you're simply creating an animation. These will only affect your project if you are deciding to program within the animation. So for example, if you decide to create an interactive animation or an interactive website or application that includes buttons, and then you need to program the buttons or program the animation or application to move to different frames within the project. Okay, so this decision doesn't affect making a simple animation. So sticking with ActionScript 3.0 is fine. Okay, so it's set up. Let's create the animation. Now, when the animation starts, I always like to set my zoom to fit in window so that I can always see the entire stage. And I like to make sure that my timeline is high enough up so that I can see all of my layers. Now, in this case, I've only got one layer at the moment, so it doesn't really matter how far I pull it up. But later on, when we add more layers, I might want to bring it up further. And let's also save the animation. So File, Save As. Choose your folder location and choose the name for your file. So I'll call it Types of Symbols. To start off, let's create the sections for the animation. So remember, we're going to have 3 different animations being shown. So we're going to have 3 different sections. So we'll draw 4 lines down the stage to separate the screen into 3 sections. So I'll begin by renaming the layer. So double click in on the layer and I'll call it Separators and press enter. And now I'm going to use the line tool. And I can, in the properties window, the tool properties window, I can select the line color, so I'll stick with red. And I can choose the stroke size, and I'm going to stick with 4. So that's the thickness of the line. I wasn't able to get 4 by moving the slider there, so I can just type the value 4 here. Okay, so I'll draw a line down the stage, top to bottom. Now, when drawing lines, I like to hold down Shift, as that will lock the line in place and give me perfectly vertical or horizontal lines, or perfectly 45-degree diagonal lines. And holding down Shift is just a useful tool to use when drawing shapes and lines. So there's my first line drawn. So rather than drawing 4 more lines freehand with a line tool, I'll use the selection tool, and I'm going to select this line and copy and paste it. So I can paste in place or paste in center. I'll go for center. Okay, so there's my 2 lines. Now, when you are moving different shapes, now if I want to move this line, because it's already selected, it's easy for me to move. Whereas if I want to move this first line, can you notice as I hover over the line, I get a little curve around my mouse pointer. Now if I try to grab the line and drag it, it's actually going to curve the line. It's not going to move it because it's not selected. So this selection tool, as well as selecting shapes and objects, it can manipulate shapes and change them. And that's what I've just done because it wasn't selected first. So I'll undo. So if I want to move a shape, I need to select it first and then I can move it. I'll select this shape and then move it. Okay, so I need to paste 2 more lines. So I'll paste one in center. So there it is. Now I'm not going to move that just yet. I'm going to paste another one. So I've just pasted another line over that 3rd line that I drew, that I pasted. Now if I select this line and move it, that 4th line, you should notice that it looks like I've only moved 1 line. So the thing with pasting multiple instances of the same object or the same shape, I should say, in Animate is that when shapes overlap each other, the bottom shape in the order, whatever part of that shape is covered up by the top shape will get deleted or get merged with the top shape. Now in this case, the bottom line was entirely covered by the top line, so the entirety of the bottom line was deleted or merged with the top line, so we can no longer see it. So when you are pasting multiple instances of the same shape, you need to paste and then move, and then paste and then move. So move each shape before you paste the next one. Okay? So I've got that line moved. I'll paste my 4th line. So there are my 4 lines. Now I'll arrange these lines to create my 3 sections. So again, rather than moving them freehand, I'm going to use the tools within Animate. So I need to select all 4 lines together. So I can use Control and A on my keyboard to select everything. Or the other thing you could do is select the frame. So frame 1 on the separators layer. And that will select everything on that frame held on the keyframe. Okay, so I've got all my lines selected. So I'm going to go to the right side of the screen and I'm going to use the Align tool. Now I'm going to start off by aligning the lines vertical center. So they're all in line at the top and bottom. Now as you could see, that didn't make much difference. If I'd moved my lines up or down, it would have realigned them so they're all the same vertical alignment. And then I'm going to distribute my lines across the screen. So I'm going to distribute them horizontally. And as you can see, we've created 1, 2, 3 sections. So my 1st line, my 2nd line, 3rd line, and 4th line. I suppose looking at it there, I didn't really need to draw 4 lines. I could have just got away with 2, and that would have created my 3 sections anyway. So for some clarity, after we finish the animation, let's name each section now. So we'll stick on the separators layer on frame 1. We're not moving from there. Let's use the text tool. So over here in the properties window, in the tool properties window, we can choose different options for the text, like the font, the size. We can choose the color. Okay, so I'll stick with what I've got at the moment and see how it looks. So I'll click into the first section, and this is where my shape is going to be displayed. I'm actually going to hold down Alt and drag shape across, and that copies the item that I'm holding. I'm also going to hold down Shift whilst moving it to hold it in line. Okay, so I held down Alt to copy and Shift to hold in line, drag it to the middle, and I'm going to double click, and this is where my graphic symbol is going to be. Oops, I didn't press enter. So just move it a bit to the left. I'm using the arrow keys on the keyboard now to move it. And then I'm going to do the same for my 3rd name. So I'm going to hold on Alt and drag, and also hold on Shift to keep it in alignment. I'm going to change this to movie clip symbol. Use my selection tool and align it within that section. Okay, and now my different sections are labeled up, so that when I come back and look at this animation later on, it's clear what I've done. Just to be a little bit picky and make my alignment even better, I'm going to select all of my objects on the stage now, so the 4 lines and the 3 pieces of text. So Control A or click on the frame 1. And I'm going to go to my alignment tool over here. And again, I'm going to distribute all of the objects horizontally. And that just aligns each of my pieces of text centrally within each section that they're in. That's the separators and the text complete, so this layer is done. Now, after you finish working on a layer, it's good practice to lock the layer here, just so that you don't accidentally click into that layer and then accidentally edit or move things around. So if I try to move this word shape here now, I can't select it because the layer is locked. So I'm not going to accidentally change and mess up my animation. Next, let's add a new layer. So we'll go down to the timeline area, and this plus here, if we click it, we add a new layer. Now this is going to be the shape, so I'll name it shape. And I'm just going to extend my timeline up a bit so I've got enough space. So I'm going to draw a rectangle, so I'll use the rectangle tool. Now I'm going to draw the same shape for each of my 3 examples, just to give a good comparison. You don't have to draw the same shape as I draw. If you want to draw something different, create your own drawing or shape with the different tools, that's fine. But for this example, I'm going to use a rectangle, and I'm going to keep all 3 the same for a good comparison. So I'll stick with the fill of black, and I'll stick with the stroke color of red. Stroke size is 4. Yeah, I'm happy with that. So there's my rectangle. Now, because this rectangle is a shape, the only ways I can animate it are with frame by frame animation or a shape tween. So in this instance, I'm going to go with the shape tween, and I'm going to create a morph effect on this rectangle and make it morph into a triangle. So I'm going to go down to my timeline here, click on my shape layer frame 1, and I'm going to right click and create a shape tween. Now it automatically creates the tween for 1 second. And you may notice that my text and my separators have disappeared. Well, they haven't actually disappeared because I'm selected on frame 24. Only the shape layer extends to frame 24. The separators layer does not extend to 24. It only extends to frame 1. So if I want to extend it out to frame 24, I just click on the separators layer on the frame I want to extend it to, and I can just add a frame there. So I can right click and just select insert frame, or I could just click F5 on the keyboard. Okay, and that makes the 2 layers the same length in frames, so the text and the separators show up to frame 24. The shape tween is applied, so let's click onto frame 1, and if I click play here, I'm going to play the animation. You see the animation plays for 1 second, which is 24 frames, because it's 24 frames per second, but nothing happens. Because on the 24th frame of my shape layer, my rectangle stays as a rectangle. Okay, so I'm going to select on that 24th frame. I'm going to use the selection tool. I'm going to deselect the rectangle, and I'm going to morph this rectangle now into a triangle. Now there's different things we could do. I could select the edge and make it curved. Okay, so we can use the selection tool to curve the edges. I'm going to undo those 4 actions. I can also use the selection tool to manipulate the corners of the shape and move them around to change the shape. But in this case, as I said, I'm going to turn this into a triangle. So I'm going to grab the top left corner, drag it towards the center until I get a straight line. So the top of the rectangle and the left side of the rectangle merging together to form one straight line, giving my shape 3 sides, so it is now a triangle. Okay, so let's view the animation now. Let's click play. Right, so I've got my rectangle on my first frame. I've got my triangle on my third frame, but when I click play, I'm actually going to turn on loop and extend this to all 24 frames so we can watch it looping. So my rectangle is morphing into a triangle, but it's taken a very strange route to do it. Now, this is one of the difficulties you can encounter when using a shape tween. The way that the artificial intelligence in Animate works might not always be as you would expect it to work. Okay, and as you can see in this case, you'd think that it would be easier for the rectangle, for the top left corner to simply move down to form the triangle, but the way Animate is making it work with the shape tween is not following that idea. Okay, so we could leave it like this, or there are some things we could do to try to give Animate a guide and some help on how we want it to manipulate the shape with the shape tween. I'll pause the animation and bring it back to frame 1. So what we can do is give animation hints on which part of the shape to animate to the next part of the shape. Okay, so what we can do is press Control, Shift and H, and as you can see it adds a little red circle to the shape. So this is called a hint. So I held down Control, Shift and H. Now I can drag this hint to any point of the shape. So I'm going to drag it to the top right corner. And then I'm going to go to the end frame, so frame 24. And on this frame, the hint is in the center. So I'm going to drag it to where I want the top right corner of the rectangle to be when it morphs into a triangle. Okay, so I want the top right corner to stay in the top right corner. And I'm going to do this again, so I'm going to go to frame 1. I'm going to add a new hint, Control Shift H. So this will add hint B. I'm going to put this in the bottom right corner of the shape. And then go to the end frame, frame 24, and move B down to the bottom right corner. Okay, so I'm telling Animate I want the top right corner, A, to stay in the top right corner when it ends, and I want the bottom right corner, B, to stay in the bottom right corner when it ends. Now this might seem logical to us, but as you can see, the artificial intelligence within Animate is working a bit differently. Okay, so let's add a third. So on frame 1 of the shape layer, Control Shift H to add a hint, C, and I'm going to drag it to the bottom left corner. And then on frame 24, let's move the hint C down to the bottom left. Now we've added in 3 hints there. Let's play the animation and see how it looks. Now, as you can see, even with 3 hints to tell Animate where we want to start certain parts of the shape and where we want to end certain parts of the shape in the animation, it's still looking odd. It's still not doing what we're expecting it to do. So we can add in some more hints. So let's add another one, Control Shift H, D, and we'll make D the top left corner. And then go to the final frame, so where it's going to end, and we'll stick with where it is actually in the center. So play, let's see how it looks now. Okay, it's slightly better. The top right and bottom left corners are doing okay, but the bottom right and top left corners are not doing quite what we want. So the way to get on this is basically just to have a play about with the hints, move them slightly, just to try to get them in different positions to see if you can give Animate the information that it can process. Okay, so I'll try D a bit. So I'll keep D top left at the start. And then on the end, let's just move it up slightly. No, that hasn't helped. Okay, so let's move it back. What about C? Let's try making the starter point for C slightly off the corner. and then the endpoint for C slightly off the corner. So rather than tell and animate where we want the corner to start and end, we'll tell animate slightly in from the corner. Okay, and that's improved our animation a lot there, hasn't it? So the top right, bottom right corners are staying exactly as they are. The bottom left corner, because we moved our hint slightly, because we moved C slightly from the corner at the beginning and end, that's helped Animate figure out exactly how we want it to work. And then D is starting top left and finishing in the center. Okay, so there we've created the morph effect, morphing from a rectangle into a triangle using the shape tween by giving Animate hints to show where we want certain points to start and then those points to end. Now let's apply some other effects to our shape tween animation. So I'm going to click on the final frame, frame 24, and go to the properties window over here, and I'm going to go to object properties, and I'm going to change the color of the final shape of the triangle. So let's make the fill yellow, and let's make the stroke color green. Now let's play the animation and see how that affects it. Okay, so not only now are we getting a morph from a rectangle into a triangle, we're also getting a morph from our colors, so black and red into yellow and green. So what else could I do? Well, I could also add an ease effect, so make it ease in or ease out. So to make the animation slower at the beginning or slower at the end. But I'm not going to add an ease effect, I'm going to keep it as it is. So this is to the frame. I could add a color effect, but I've just changed the color of the object, so adding a color effect to the frame, I'm not going to bother doing that. Okay, so there are a few different things you could change if you want, but I'm going to keep it as it is. So just apply a color change. Okay, so I'm happy with that, with the rectangle morphing into the triangle and also changing color. So I'm happy that our shape animation is completed. So I'm going to lock the layer. Now next, let's move on to the graphic symbol. So add a new layer, and I'm going to call this graphic. So in this layer, we're going to add a graphic symbol that we're going to animate in the same way that we've done this. Because as we said, to make a comparison of the shape, the graphic, and the movie clip, if we use the same shape or the same object with the same animation, then we can see how each differs slightly. Okay, so I'm actually going to copy this shape. So rather than drawing a new rectangle, I may as well just copy it because I've already got it drawn. So I'm going to go to frame 1. I'm going to unlock the shape layer. Use the selection tool to select the rectangle. Now I'm double clicking in the center to make sure I select the edge also. Because if I just click in the center, I'm only selecting the black color. Okay, so I'll double click in the center, select it all, copy. Now I'm not going to paste right now because I'm selected on the shape layer. So I'm going to lock that layer, click into the graphic layer on frame 1, and I'm going to paste the shape in the center. Okay, I'll move it down slightly to line it up with the first rectangle. Okay, so there's my rectangle. I'm going to make sure it's all selected now, and I'm going to convert this to a symbol. So I can right click and choose convert to symbol, or I could modify, convert to symbol, or on my keyboard I could simply click F8. Okay, now this is going to be a graphic symbol, so I'm going to keep this as graphic, and I'm going to name it actually graphic example, and click OK. Now if we click into the library up here, the library window, we'll see the graphic example symbol now appears in our library. So we've got it on the stage already, but if for some reason we deleted it, we can just go into our library and drag it onto the stage. And I can drag as many instances of this symbol now onto the stage, so it's now a reusable asset. Now I'm going to perform the same animation on this rectangle as we performed on this first rectangle. So if I go onto the graphic layer, if I right click to create a shape tween, you'll see that it's not an option, it's grayed out. That's because shape tweens can only be applied to shapes. We've just converted this shape to a symbol, so the only options we've got to animate it are frame by frame animation or classic or motion tweens. But because it's a symbol, it's got its own container. So this symbol is made of a shape. So I can click on the symbol, and if I double click it, we will enter into the container of the shape of the symbol, where we will see our shape that we just created, our rectangle. And as you can see, you can tell that it's a shape because it's got the grey dots, and if I try to manipulate some of the lines, I can move it as I would a shape. Now you can also tell that we're in the container of this symbol because up here we've gone from scene 1 to the graphic example symbol. And also down here on the timeline, you can see we've got a brand new timeline with just layer 1. So we've no longer got those the 3 layers that we had on scene 1. Now let's go back to scene 1. So in the top here, I'm going to click scene 1. And you can see we return to the main timeline where we've got our 3 layers. And I can go back into the graphic symbol by double clicking on the symbol. And it takes me into that graphic symbol's timeline. Now what's really useful about this is that this allows us to create animations within symbols that can then be put onto the timeline. Okay, so we're not actually putting any animation on the timeline when we create an animation within, we're not actually putting any animation onto the main timeline when we create an animation within the symbol timeline. So let's create the same morph effect of the rectangle morphing into a triangle as we did for the shape inside this graphic symbol, because remember, inside this graphic symbol we've got the shape now that we can apply a shape tween to. So I'm going to rename the layer, I'm going to call it graphic example. I'm going to right click here on frame 1 and create a shape tween, and then on frame 24, because it automatically extends it out to frame 24, I'm going to turn this into a triangle. Now again, if I click play, because I've got loop on, I'm only looping the first frame, so I need to extend this out. If I click play, again we're creating this strange effect of the rectangle morphing in a strange way into the triangle. So just like I did for the shape, I'm going to add in those shape hints. Okay, so click on frame 1, Control Shift H, and I'm going to do exactly the same as I did for the shape. Now if I wanted to, I could just add the 4 hints all together and then go on to frame 24 and move them, but I'm going to do them one by one. So frame 1, add the hint, Control Shift H, and that's C. And remember C, we put slightly off the corner, wasn't it? Okay. And I'm going to do the same for C on frame 24. And then add another hint, Control Shift H for D. And then keep that in the center. Now how does that look? Play. Yeah, great, we've got that animation happening. And to make it consistent with the shape again, I'm going to click on the final frame, frame 24, go to the properties, object properties window, change the fill to the same yellow and the stroke to the same green. Okay, play. Yeah, and it looks the same. Okay. Now let's return to the main timeline by clicking scene 1. And let's view our animation so far. So there, we've got on the left the shape animating, morphing from a rectangle to a triangle and changing color. And on the graphic symbol, we've got the exact same thing happening. The shape morphing into the triangle and also changing color. But on the main timeline, the shape is a shape. And the graphic symbol animation is a symbol. So even though they look the same, they're actually slightly different on the main timeline because they are different types of objects within Animate. this is a shape, this is a symbol. But when we play them on the main timeline, they play exactly the same. They look exactly the same. So this is an example of how the same animations can be created with shapes or with graphic symbols. Okay, we are going to animate this graphic symbol on the main timeline more, but before we do, we're going to add in the movie clip symbol just to show the difference of how the movie clip symbol will act compared to the graphic symbol. So once again, I'm going to add a new layer and call this movie clip, and I use an underscore because we can't do spaces, and I'm going to extend my timeline a bit. Okay, I'll lock the graphic layer, and I'm going to unlock the shape layer, so I can click on frame 1 and I can select the entire shape and copy it. Oops, I did that wrong. Undo. Copy, and then I'll lock the shape layer, and I'll go to the movie clip layer, frame 1, and I'll paste the shape onto the layer. Now, the movie clip layer, this shape is overlapping the graphic symbol. But because that symbol is no longer a shape on the main timeline, the part of it that's covered doesn't get merged or deleted. So we don't have that problem with symbols as we do with shapes, which is beneficial. Okay, so I'm going to move this movie clip in lines with the other two and into the movie clip section. And then I'm going to convert it to a symbol. But this time, instead of a graphic type, I'm going to choose movie clip. And I'm going to call it movie clip example. So as you can see, it fills out the frames of the main timeline up to frame 24 because that's how long our animation is. And if I play it, we haven't got this animating because we haven't given it the animation yet. So just like the graphic symbol, I can click into the movie clip symbol, double click. And then this brings us into the timeline of the movie clip symbol. As you can see, up here is showing movie clip example, and we've got this brand new timeline. And also if I click in the library, I can see I've got those two symbols now, not just the one. Now if we compare the movie clip and the graphic in the timeline, in the library, sorry, you can see they've got slightly different icons. Okay, so this is a graphic and this is a movie clip icon. Okay, so it's easy to see the difference. Okay, so for our movie clip symbol, again, we're going to do exactly the same animation as we did for the shape on the graphic. So on the timeline, this is my movie clip. Example. And because this is a shape held within the symbol, I can actually now apply the shape tween. So right click on frame 1 and create the shape tween. Again, on frame 24, I'm going to use the selection tool, deselect the shape, and then I can manipulate the shape to form a triangle. Play the animation, and again, it's odd, it's not doing what I want, so I'm going to add in those 4 hints, just like I did for the other 2 objects. A, back to frame 1, Control-Shift-H, bottom right, and then we want it to end at the bottom right. Back to frame 1, Control-Shift-H. Now C, remember, we put slightly off the corner, so do the same here. Back to frame 1, Control-Shift-H for D, and then that's going to end in the middle. Okay, play, and there's my animation working. Exactly the same as it does for the shape and the graphic. So once again, I'm going to click on frame 24, go to my Object Properties window, and make the fill yellow and the stroke color green, just as I did for the other 2 shapes. Play, and that's working exactly the same. Okay, so let's return to the main timeline, scene 1, and watch them playing together. Now if you click play, you'll notice that the shape is animating and the graphic symbol is animating, but the movie clip symbol is not animating. So why has it stopped working? Well, let's go back into the symbol and see if the animation is there. Double click. Oops, pause. Okay, so looking in here now, it is there, it is working because I'm playing it within the symbol. But when I return to the main timeline and play, this animation does not happen. Now that's because movie clip symbols, any animation that is contained within the movie clip symbol, plays independently of the main timeline, and we can't actually view it on the main timeline. So to see this working, we're going to go to the top right. There's a little play button called Test Movie. Now, if we test a movie, this is where we can see the three objects animating as we've created. So there's the shape, the graphic, and the movie clip. Now, to test a movie clip symbol further, I can right-click on my animation, and I can uncheck play so I can stop it playing. And now you notice that the shape and the graphic symbol stop because they are animated on the main, because the main timeline is stopped. But the movie clip keeps playing because, as we've just mentioned, movie clips play independently of the main timeline. Graphic symbols do not play independently of the main timeline. So even though this animation is held within the graphic symbol, it does not play when we stop the main timeline playing. Now, if I resume play, all three is playing now, but the movie clip has continued from the frame where it left off. Okay, it hasn't realigned itself with the shape and the graphic. So the shape and the graphic have restarted from frame 1. The movie clip has continued playing, and as you can see, they're now out of time. Okay, again, highlighting how the movie clip symbol is independent of the main timeline. So I'll cross that off to close it. Now let's test this further. Let's look more into what we're doing. Okay, and look at why we could use a graphic symbol or why we could use a movie clip symbol. So in this example of the animation that we are creating here, we've created an animation within the graphic symbol. Now that is not actually good practice. We're just doing it here to illustrate the points of when we should and shouldn't use graphic and movie clip symbols. So if we click into the graphic symbol, I need to unlock the layer. Notice that the timeline lasts for 24 frames, 1 second, which matches perfectly with the main timeline, 24 frames, 1 second. Now, because the timelines match up within the graphic and on the main timeline, there's no interference of the graphic symbol animation. Okay, they match up perfectly, so they're in sync. Now let's go into the graphic symbol. Let's extend this animation. Okay, so I'm going to click on frame 24 and drag that keyframe, extend it out. Let's make it 6 seconds. Now if I play, we can see this rectangle is animating. Oh, I need to extend my loop. We can see that the rectangle is animating into the triangle, but now it's a lot slower. So let's return to the main timeline, scene 1, and let's view our animation now. So the main timeline lasts for 1 second, so our animation lasts for 1 second. Within that 1 second, the shape rectangle morphs into a triangle, but our graphic symbols animation does not complete because, remember, it lasts for 6 seconds. So only 1 second worth of this graphic symbol animation is happening. And if we test the movie, again, we can see that happening here. It's clear that the graphic symbols animation is not completing. So this illustrates why it is not a good idea to put animations within graphic symbols. Because if you do, then you need to make sure that your main timeline and your graphic symbol timeline match up perfectly. Otherwise, any animation held within the graphic symbol will just not complete, as it's doing here. Okay, and you won't get the full effect of the animation you were creating. So I'm going to go into the graphic symbol and revert my animation from 6 back to 1 second. Now I've moved the keyframe, but it's kept all those other frames, so I'm going to highlight them and just right click and remove frames. Okay, so that's back to 1 second. Okay, Now, if that's the case, then of animations within graphic symbols not lining up well with the main timeline, what's the point in using a graphic symbol? Well, you'd use a graphic symbol if you were intending on creating a symbol that does not contain its own animation. Okay, so as you mentioned, we're doing this here to illustrate the example, but it is not really good practice to be containing animations within a graphic symbol, unless you know for definite that the graphic symbol's timeline and the main timeline will line up. Okay, so let's try the same now for the movie clip. We'll enter the movie clip symbols container, and we'll extend this animation out to 6 seconds. And I'll extend my loop out to 6 seconds. So again, there's my animation, rectangle to triangle, going a lot slower. Return to my main timeline and click play. Again, the movie clip does not play because it's independent of the main timeline. So we need to test the movie to view it happening. So what is happening? Well, the shape animation lasts for 1 second, the graphic animation lasts for 1 second, but the movie clip symbol, which is independent of the main timeline, is performing its own animation lasting for 6 seconds. If I stop the animation, the movie clip continues, and regardless of the main timeline's length, it just keeps playing. If I resume, it continues on its own path. Okay, so if there's any time you want to create a symbol that contains its own animation, make sure you are creating a movie clip symbol and not a graphic symbol. Use a graphic symbol for static symbols that are not containing their own animations. Use movie clip symbols for symbols that contain their own animations. Okay, I'm going to actually leave the movie clip symbol animation as it is. The other difference between graphic and movie clip symbols is if we select the movie clip symbol, if we go to the object properties window, we've got a few more options than we do with the graphic symbol. Okay, now this is not it doesn't have a major impact on the way we animate, but it's just one of the differences that we get some more options with a movie clip than we do with a graphic symbol. So there's our graphic and movie clip symbols animated within their own containers. Now let's do some animation to those symbols on the main timeline. Now, as we tested earlier on, we cannot apply shape tweens here because these are not shapes on the main timeline. But what we can apply are classic tweens or motion tweens. So I'm going to do first the graphic symbol, so I'll lock the movie clip layer. And I'm going to apply a motion tween. Now we can see that tween has been applied because the layer turns a yellowy color and we get this different icon on the layer. But nothing happens. The animation doesn't change. So let's click on the final frame 24 of the graphic layer, and let's move this symbol. So from the center down to the bottom right of that section. And as you can see, a motion path appears, showing us how the symbol moves. Now if you play the animation, we'll see now that not only is the animation within the symbol happening of the rectangle morphing into the triangle, but we've now also animated the symbol on the main timeline to move. Okay, so let's manipulate it a little bit further. Let's change the path. So I'll make the starting path up here. So I'll just click the first frame to make sure I'm not overlapping the line. And then as well as moving, I'm going to change its path, make it curve. So it's now not just a point-to-point animation, we've changed this path. If I wanted to create a simple point-to-point animation, sometimes a classic tween can be a little bit easier to use. But in this case, I want to manipulate the path and move it around, so I used a motion tween. Okay, and we can see now the morph effect is happening within the animation, within the symbol, and the movement effect is happening on the main timeline. Okay, now I'm going to have a play about with the motion tween. So you can test it as well. You can follow what I do, or test it yourself, make your own changes. So I'm just gonna look at this animation and see how I can see how I can change it. Okay, so I'm gonna actually, I think, move this more into the center, and rather than make a curve, I'm gonna try and manipulate the line so that it flips up a bit. So it bounces up and then comes down. Okay. I'll also add another effect. So I'm going to go to the end of the motion tween. And over in the frame properties window, I can add some effects to the tween. So I could add an ease effect, but I'm not going to add an ease effect. I think I'll go with a rotation effect. So at the moment it's not rotating. I think I'll make it rotate clockwise, and the number of times, rather than one rotation, I'll go for 2. Let's see what that does. Play. So then now our graphic symbol, because of the motion tween, is flipping up and rotating around before it lands. Let's also apply a color effect. So click on the final keyframe of the graphic layer, and then on the object, in the objects property windows, we'll go to color effects, and we can change the brightness, so make it brighter or less bright. We can change the tint, so we can choose a tint color, and then manipulate the tint strength and the RGB colors. We can also use advanced to manipulate them more, to have more control, or we can change the alpha effect, which is the transparency. Okay, so 100% makes it completely visible, or if I reduce that percentage, it reduces the visibility of the shape. So I'm going to go for a tint effect, and I'm going to make the tint green. I'll stick with green. Okay, play. Okay, so it's changed up our graphic symbol quite a bit, but still within the symbol, if I stop the animation, still within the symbol, we've got our original rectangle to triangle morph effect happening. Okay, so let's lock the graphic layer and unlock the movie clip layer, and now let's animate the movie clip. So again, I'm going to apply a motion tween, because I'm going to want to move it around, move the path a bit, and not just make it point to point. So go to the final frame, and on the final frame, let's again move it somewhere else. I'll move it up here, and I think on the first frame I'll move it here, and then I'm going to make this animation just move around quite a bit. So I think the effect I'll go for is make it move around this section and finish here. I think I'll also make it smaller, so change the scale, and I'll also add a transparency effect. Okay, so change the alpha. Okay, so let's manipulate this line, let's move it around. Now, if I want to manipulate one point individually, I could click on that frame on the timeline, and I could add a keyframe by pressing F6. And now this point here I can see, because it's slightly bigger than the other points, I can manipulate my line around that point. So that point stays stationary unless I grab it and move it. Okay, so if you want to manipulate your path further than just a simple one path, we can add in extra keyframes to the motion tween. So again, I'll add F6, and then I can manipulate my path more, change the way it moves. Okay, always using the selection tool. So let's have a look at this now. It's going to look a bit strange moving around the screen here, but that's okay, that's what I was going for. Okay, so I'll click on the final keyframe, frame 24, And as I said, I want to reduce the size, so change the scale. Now to do this, I'm going to use the free transform tool. And if I drag it in from the side, from the corner, sorry, I can change the size. But if I hold down Shift, I can maintain the proportions or the aspect ratio. Okay, so I'll keep Shift held down. I could rotate it a little bit. And I think I'm going to also skew it. As well as scaling it, I'll skew the shape. Okay, now let's see how this affects my motion tween. Okay, so as well as moving around, it is scaling, it is skewing, and it is rotating slightly. So on that final frame, let's now add in the color effect. So I'm going to use the selection tool. I didn't really need to use the selection tool, but I just wanted to click it. And in the object properties window, let's go to the color effect. And instead of none, let's choose alpha. And let's reduce so the shape becomes quite transparent. And we'll go with the transparency level of 20%. So now let's play it. So I'm expecting now, as well as the shape, the object, sorry, the symbol moving around, scaling and skewing and rotating, the transparency is also reducing. Okay, now how come then I can see this happening on the main timeline if it's a movie clip? This is because the animation is actually happening on the main timeline. If I pause it and return into the container for the movie clip by double clicking, we can see that the animation within the movie clip is still happening. That 6-second morph from a rectangle to a triangle. But now that's not the only animation on this movie clip. That's the animation within the movie clip, but on the main timeline we've created a separate animation on the movie clip. So that plays. We can see that the animation held within the movie clip still does not play. So to do that, let's test the movie. Let's view it by testing the movie. Okay, so there's my shape, morphing and changing color. There's my graphic symbol, which holds the shape, the morphs and change color. And then the graphic symbol is animated to jump up and rotate and land and change color effect. Then my movie clip, I can see the morph effect still happening to the shape within the movie clip, where it's morphing from the rectangle to the triangle. But on the main timeline, we've got the animation of the movie clip moving around, reducing its transparency, scaling and skewing and rotating. Okay, so if I stop the animation, if I right click and deselect play, we can see that the animation of the movie clip on the main timeline now stops. Okay, again, because it's on the main timeline, whereas the animation within the movie clip continues to play. Okay, once again proving that the movie clip plays independently of the main timeline, unless the movie clip is animated on the main timeline. I can resume and the movie clip keeps playing. So this brings to an end this tutorial. So to finish off I'm gonna lock the movie clip layer and file save my work. Okay, so we've completed this tutorial by creating a shape and animating that shape on the main timeline, by creating a graphic symbol that contains its own animation and is animated on the main timeline separately, and creating a movie clip that contains its own animation and is animated on the main timeline separately. So hopefully from this tutorial you've developed a better idea of the difference between shapes, graphic symbols and movie clip symbols, and hopefully you've got a better idea of when to and when not to use graphic symbols, and when to and when not to use movie clip symbols. So thank you very much for following along with this Technocamps tutorial on Adobe Animate. We hope you found it useful, and please check out our other tutorials on our YouTube channel.